Welcome. Hi, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Dr. Kristen Zukowski. I'm one of the pre-med advisors here at OITE. And today I am here with Dr. Taborn.
Everybody.
Introduce yourself.
Hi, well, I'm Dr. John Taborn, and I'm one of the career counselors and pre-med advising team members as well. Kristen will be leading, but you'll probably see me on and hear me every once in a while.
Super. Thank you, John.
Nice to see you.
So today I'm going to be talking about interviewing, but just as a reminder, getting into medical school is challenging. So you're getting closer and closer and closer, and now you have submitted your application and you're going to start getting interviews. And so you're getting closer, not quite there yet, but almost. Okay, and just a reminder, and Dr. Hernandez Ramon uses this slide all the time, that it's not only that numbers matter. And so keep that in mind as you are getting interview invites, that it's not just about numbers. Your preparation, your interviews really do matter. And so that's why it's important to start preparing now, whether or not you have gotten any interview invites. It's important to go ahead and start preparing now. So today's plan, I will talk about really the purpose of the interview, what to do even before you get invitations. So that's now. What to do once you get your first invitations, what to do before the interview, the actual interview, and then what to do after the interview. So I'll be talking about all of these pieces today. So the purpose of the interview, really, if you get an interview invite, it means that you are qualified for medical school based on your application. So you should be excited, and you absolutely can be excited. It does mean you are qualified. The interview is then to look further at your personal qualities. So they care about your enthusiasm, your maturity, integrity, all of these things, and all of those AAMC competencies, both personal and academic AAMC competencies. Remember, the other purpose of the interview is that an interview goes both ways. It should really be a conversation. And so in the back of your mind, be thinking, is this a good fit for me? Am I a good fit for them? Are they a good fit for me? Is this where I want to spend my time in medical school? So think of it also as an opportunity for you to learn about the school and its programs. Okay, this is from last year about conducting interviews during the coronavirus pandemic. Last year, all the medical schools went to a completely virtual format. What we are hearing this year is that most schools at least have a virtual component. Some of them have an option to come in person, many don't. Down here at the bottom, I put a link to this document for download. And this is a spreadsheet that goes school by school, and it tells you and this is not often open to applicants, but this year it's open to advisors and to applicants. So you can go through and look at all of the schools to which you applied and see what their plan is for this year. When are they going to be sending out their invitations or starting to send out their invitations? What is the format going to look like? Like everything else, some schools give you more or less information on this document, but I think it would be worthwhile if you've already applied, go ahead, download it and take a look at the schools and see what you can find out about them. Again, so you can start preparing. Some of them tell you the types of interviews, if they're MMI interviews, again, what their plan is this year. You need to be able to make a personal connection with your interviewer, even through a virtual interface. So it's something to, again, to be aware of. How are you going to make this personal connection? What are you going to do? So before the invitation even happens, again, this is now, go ahead and start preparing. They're going to be asking you the same types of questions you've been asking yourself for years. Why did you choose this profession? Why did you choose those particular science courses? What are your life goals? They want to know, is this candidate making an informed choice? So be thinking about that. How did you make this decision? What skills do you have? What opportunities have you taken advantage of where you have confirmed that indeed you do want to go to professional school, medical school, vet school, dental school, PA school, whatever that happens to be? You need to be really clear about the opportunities, the experiences that you've had, and why you want to matriculate into that school. They also want to know, is the candidate prepared? And if you are here right now, if you are starting to prepare now, you will be prepared by interview day. So start working on answering all of these questions for yourself now. Maybe that's going to be talking to friends, mentors, peers, so that you can practice some of these things out loud. Okay, then yes, success, you receive an invitation for an interview. Now what do you do? The first thing right after you receive your invitation is courtesy's next logical steps. Make sure you respond quickly and politely. That means that you really need to be keeping up with your emails, your portals, know how that invitation is going to come to you. The next thing is to arrange a date that works with your schedule. Most of the time, medical schools are going to give you several options for scheduling your interview. So think about your schedule, think about your experiments in the lab, think about when your other interviews are already scheduled. Let's say you already have an interview and then you get another invitation. Do you want those to be back to back? Do you want to separate them a little bit? So think about your schedule and when the best time might be to have that interview. The last thing I have on here is to take advantage of all virtual interactions that those schools offer. They're going to have optional sessions with students, optional virtual tours, optional sessions with admissions, with committees. Take advantage of all of them. Again, this is how you're going to gather all of your data. Are you a good fit? Are they a good fit? Often at these virtual interactions that they offer, and last year I know some schools, a week before your interview had some optional sessions. That's a way for you to gain information and continue to prepare for that interview, right? So if you're meeting with students, you can ask them some questions about the programs. Then when your interviewer asks you, why do you want to go to this school? You can say, oh, last week I talked to X student who told me about this program that I really want to take part of at your school. Or last week, this student told me XYZ about this program, and I have a question about that. Can you give me some more information? So take advantage of all of those offerings. The other things, this whole list, I'm going to go through these one by one to do before the interview, is really to start your preparation. So first, make sure you read all of the instructions completely, carefully, follow all of the steps, do everything that they want you to do to make sure that that interview is scheduled and ready to go. For some of you who are applying to MD PhD programs, they might ask you for some faculty members that you might want to meet with or you might want to interview with. So make sure you do all of those things in a timely fashion. Consider your attire and your personal care. So for these interviews, whether they are virtual or not, you should expect to be in business attire, neat, clean, professional. Remember, this is a conservative profession, so you should expect to wear a jacket. That doesn't necessarily mean you have to wear it the entire day, but I would err on the side of conservative business attire. Make sure you're dressed from head to toe. So there have been situations that we've heard about. Somebody was in shorts, they put business attire on the top, they had to get up. Sometimes in this room here where I am, I need to turn my fan on or off. And so if I was not dressed from head to toe, you would see whatever was on the bottom. So I don't even recommend slippers, right? Just in case. You don't have to wear the most uncomfortable high heels, but be aware just in case, off chance, they might be seeing you completely head to toe. Your clothing should also be modest. So I wouldn't have a flashy tie, flashy jewelry, anything that is too out of the ordinary. Wear a suit, wear a skirt or pantsuit, dress. You could wear a dress with a blazer. I put this image here of some options that you could think about. Pay attention to hair and nails. Tone down your makeup and remove any jewelry that that isn't just like subtle jewelry, like I would say, some pearls, some small earrings, small necklace, but nothing beyond that. First impressions really matter, and this is one way that you can show that you are really serious about this profession. Okay, the next thing you can do to prepare is test all of your technology, especially if this is completely virtual. Okay, so think about where you're going to be sitting One of the things when I do mock interviews with students is I pay attention to what they're sitting in, right? When you go to a university, when you go to an interview, you have no control over the chair. If you're virtual, you have control over your environment. Where do you want to be sitting? What kind of chair? What do you want your background to look like? Pay attention to lighting. I know lots of people really like those ring lights that you can buy that are really cheap on Amazon to make sure that the lighting is even, that you can definitely be seen. Think about the platforms. So many schools don't use Zoom necessarily. They use something Zoom-like. And so make sure you're testing that. Schools often a couple of days before, again, have some optional sessions where you can come on and test that platform. I would recommend that you do that. The earlier, the better. Some platforms work a little bit better with a Mac, a little bit better with a PC. So make sure everything is ready to go and that your technology won't be a barrier to your interview. Test your microphone, test your headphones. Nothing new on race day, okay? I'm a runner. And the rule, and I think this goes for interviews too, is nothing new on race day. Not a new computer, not a new microphone, not new headphones, not new attire, okay? Make sure you have tested everything out so that if you need to buy something, you need to borrow something, you've done that way ahead of time. Pay attention to where you're going to be having the interview. So I wouldn't recommend testing all of these things at home and you decide you're actually going to have your interview somewhere on campus. I would do all of your testing wherever you are going to be having that interview. Okay, the other thing that you can practice is your body language. This is something you can work on. Start testing now. Here is a communication survey results, and here's what we know, right? Body language, tone of voice matter a lot more than words. You can imagine if you show up to an interview and you sound and look like this. Yeah, I want to go to medical school. No one's going to believe you, right? They're not. They're going to be paying attention to your tone, to your body language, to your eye contact, to other things, less to the actual words that you were saying. Not saying words are not important, but practice your body language, practice how you come across over Zoom. Here's some more body language things that you can practice. Your posture. When walking, when sitting, I think this goes for the virtual setting as well. We can tell if you're all hunched over your computer, you're sitting down, you're looking down at something. Practice this. Eye contact. This is one of the most challenging over Zoom and one that I struggle with as well. Look at your camera, not at the little box on your screen. That is how you are going to show eye contact when you are in an interview. I left here firm handshake. I added maybe not, probably not this year, but it's something to be aware of. Pay attention to what others are doing. Gestures and movements that show enthusiasm. I think sometimes it's distracting if you're using your arms a lot, especially over Zoom and especially in front of your face, or if you're shaking your computer because you're gesturing so much. So practice all of those things. Make sure you're interacting with everyone. This is also challenging over Zoom, but try to, if you're in a panel interview, you're with other students, ask questions of different folks. Pay attention, thank everyone. Be aware of any nervous habits that you have. And again, I think this is one benefit of the virtual setting that you have control over. If you are a fidgeter, find yourself a fidget item that you can fidget with off screen. There are some $9 fidget cubes. I wish I had mine. My kids keep taking it from me, but they're awesome and I use mine all the time. And so find something for those nervous habits. I mentioned voice already. Practice your tone. Ask some people, how do I come across? How do I sound? Can you hear me? And maybe that's something that you're going to need to be asking in your interview. Can you hear me? And if you tend to speak quieter, make sure that you are practicing because over Zoom it can be really challenging. This is a TED Talk from Amy Cuddy, who talks about the importance of body language, preparing for interviews ahead of time. And she talks a lot about power posing. Again, when I first saw these studies, I wasn't quite sure. I was I didn't really believe them, but now that I have tried them, even before my PhD defense, this is something that I did. And so she talks about go in front of the mirror, put your hands on your hips, stand up really tall, look in the mirror, tell yourself that you're gonna do a really great job. You are prepared, you are ready, your goal is to go to medical school. And this really, what your body does affects everything else in your brain, in your body, and will impact your chances of success. So I would encourage you to watch this video. It's great and it's short. The next thing you can do to prepare is think about common questions and review your application, all of your essays. I told you already, if you get an interview invite, that means that you are ready. In their mind, you're qualified. So make sure that that is the person that shows up for your interviews. So read your secondaries, read your primaries, read all interactions that you have had with that school so that you make sure that that person shows up. Some common questions. Most interviews are going to start with this, tell me about yourself. So this is one I would absolutely practice. I wouldn't memorize it. I wouldn't over practice it, but start thinking about what you might say. Some personal information, maybe where you grew up, a hobby, a little bit about your story, something to remember you. This is their first interaction. This is where first impressions matter. So think about what you want to tell them. Maybe this is something that isn't common, and so you want to say that right and up front. It's also important to include your interest in medicine here. I hear from students all the time who don't mention medicine in the tell me about yourself. They say, well, of course I'm interested in medicine. I'm here. Of course I'm interested in dental school, vet school. That's why I'm here. I need you to say that right up front in the tell me about yourself, even if that's one example of one experience that has impacted you or why you want to be here. And then say, I'm really excited to be here today. I'm really looking forward to finding out more about your program because I'm really looking forward to go to vet school one day. This should be driven by interests, but not a bulleted list. This is where it can get a little bit tricky, how many things you want to include in this tell me about yourself, because it should be pretty short, but I need enough information so that I remember you and I know you're interested in medicine or the professional school to which you're applying. Next common question. Tell me about a weakness. What we recommend is that you name it. Go ahead and tell me what that weakness is, the relevance for medical school and or whatever profession you will have one day. Give me a specific example, okay, of a time maybe that this impacted you in the past. Strategies that you have already shown that you are working on this, you're making some progress. So sometimes I tell students, okay, give me an example from college, give me an example from your current position. Maybe that's later in college, maybe that's from your post-bac experience at the NIH. We don't recommend, and what we hear from admissions committees is that they really don't like the, oh, I'm going to turn my weakness into a strength. I'm a perfectionist. Really, they want to hear about your thought process, your critical thinking. And so we recommend you choose a real weakness, not one that's going to be a red flag. So this is one that we practice often in the mock interviews, but not turning it into a strength. More common questions. Why this school? Mostly you're going to be talking about them and you're going to need to know specifics. So this is something, especially if you have multiple interviews, this is something you want to review the night before the morning of. What is their mission, their curriculum, programs, including the names. You should know the names of the programs, specifics about the communities that they serve and their hospital affiliations. You want to show that you're a good fit. So one way that you could frame this is instead of saying you, your school this, your school this, your school this, you turn that into I. I look forward to participating in the student-run clinic named X. I know that the hospital affiliation of your program is X and Y and Z, and X and Y and Z about rotations, clinics, programs, courses. Here's where you can include information that you've obtained from other students, where those pre-meetings, those other virtual opportunities, maybe you've made some connections with previous post-bacs, other people that you know who are already in medical school. This is where you can give that information. The last thing that we do recommend that you include, if this is the case for you, is these other important things at the end. Again, location, personal interest, family. Medical schools want you to be happy. They want you to be successful once you get there. So if your entire family is near that school, you have some connections to that location or that city, go ahead and say that here at the end. Again, keep it brief, but I think it is definitely important. Next type of question you might get are these what we call behavioral questions, like tell me about a challenging situation. The format we recommend is STAR or SAR. The situation that you pick, and sometimes in the moment you're like, oh my goodness, I can't come up with a challenging situation or a time when. Think of one and tell me specifically what happened in that situation. That should be a short paragraph. What they really care about is that A, what actions did you take in that situation? What did you do? What did you think about? Who did you reach out to? What strategies did you use? And then tell me what the result is. Here's what happened. Here's what I did. Here was the result. So for a lot of these questions, you can think about this format. You might get a COVID-19 question. It's important if you get one of these, let's say it's how has COVID impacted you? Maybe it's as broad as that. Don't blame or try not to blame the pandemic, but it's okay to discuss difficulties. Perhaps you didn't get to go into the lab for a while. Perhaps something happened at home. Maybe some of your classes were completely virtual. Tell them all of those things. But again, more importantly, what did you learn about yourself over the last 18 months? What opportunities did you take advantage of? What things did you try? And what did you learn about people, healthcare, medicine, research? All of these things are important as you're thinking about being a future physician. You might get asked, tell me about your research. This one is one of the ones that is really important to read your audience and know who your interviewer is. So any of this information that you get ahead of time, look up all of these people, find out who's interviewing you, if they do research, what they research. And so this is one that could be slightly different for MD only or MD PhD candidates, especially because MD PhD candidates, you might be meeting with medical school faculty and you might be meeting with research faculty. So for MD only, start with the big picture and keep it a little bit medicine related, especially if you're meeting with medical school faculty admissions committee members. How's your research improving diagnosis, treatment, prognosis, or our understanding of human health? Then you can take it back to them. Do you want some more details about my project? You can give some general things about your project. If they want to know more, they'll ask you at that point. If they know a lot about that field or they're really interested in that field, it's okay to give some more details here. For MD, PhD, your answer may really differ based on your interviewer and who they are. Be prepared to discuss more specifics, especially with research faculty. What is your question? What are your research? What is your impact? Not that you aren't going to be saying these things necessarily if you're MD only, but if you're applying for an MD, PhD and you are, especially if you're interviewing with someone whose field is very close to yours or they know a lot about your field, be prepared to go a lot deeper there. And again, you can ask them, do you want to know more? Do you know a lot about this topic? What can I give you more information about? There are so many other questions that you might get asked. It's not possible to prepare them all, okay? So don't try to prep every single question that by Googling medical school interviews you find, okay? But start thinking about Who are you? Why do you want to go to medical school? How can I show my enthusiasm? How can I show my critical thinking? So I just have some additional questions that you might hear. Things like, where do you see yourself in 10 years? Why have you chosen this field? Why did you choose to major in? What's been the most rewarding experience of your life? Again, I think for some of these questions, it doesn't matter what you answer, but they want to hear how you answer it, how you explain your thought process. Can you communicate really well? What have you read recently for pleasure? What could you contribute to the school? Why do you think you're a good candidate? So some of these are challenging. Here are some more. At the bottom, I have a link to 100 questions for MD interviews from the University of Colorado. Again, I think it's important to read some of these. If there's some that are really challenging for you, talk to someone about them. Go ahead and practice them. It's okay for all of these questions to pause for just a minute. They know you're a real person. So you can say, wow, that's really challenging. Let me think about that for a second. Pause, collect your thoughts. Sometimes when we're in interviews, it seems like 5 minutes that we have paused, when in actuality, it's only 10 seconds. So practice that. It's also important for you to have a sense of some current issues. That means major happenings in our current healthcare field. This could be things like healthcare reform, US or UN involvement in hotspots, global efforts on the environment, presidential initiatives, and other relevant news. Things like the drug epidemic, shortage of primary care physicians, the pandemic. To start preparing for these questions, watch the news a little bit, at least read the newspaper. Perhaps you can look at the newspaper for that particular city, town, or school. See what's important right now, see what's happening. If you're interviewing for a school in Texas or Florida or Missouri, that might be a little bit different. They might have slightly different questions than if you're interviewing in New York, Massachusetts, California. So think about all of these things. If you want some more information about those types of things that are happening, as well as ethical issues, here are the 2 books that we recommend. There's one called Medical Ethics, a very short introduction. It's a very little short book, but it gives a really nice overview of medical ethical issues. The other one is called Doing Right. It's a little bit bigger, but we do recommend both of these books if you want some more information about ethical issues and how you can prepare. Okay, so we've gone through quite a few things before the interview, common questions, but the last thing is really start preparing your questions for them. Like I said, it's a 2-way conversation, and you need to find out, is this where I want to go to medical school? Is this where I want to go to vet school? Do I want to spend 4 years at this place? You should be thinking about personal questions, programmatic questions, and this is another piece that really could differ depending on who you're talking to. Are you talking to the director of the program? Are you talking to a student, a faculty member, a member of the admissions committee? And so I would have a couple of different lists of questions that you want answered at some point during your interview process. Okay, we've done our preparation. We're now ready. It is the day of your interview or the evening before your interview. Here are some things we recommend. Mindfulness, meditation. If it happens to be one of the days that we have mindfulness meditation, come and join one of our lunchtime sessions at OITE. Think about your thoughts. Be calm as you can be. This is a stressful time. Think about your shoulders, right? I know when I get stressed, the first thing that happens is my shoulders go way up here. And so take some calming breaths. Maybe this is one thing you want to practice now. See which one of these things might be helpful. 4, 7, 8 breathing is this square breathing. So you can think about breathing in for 4, holding your breath for 7, and out for 8, okay? And I have power posing on here too. So consider all of these things, again, just before your interview. How are you going to get to sleep the night before? What are you going to do that morning to be confident and prepared and eager and enthusiastic for this interview? Here are some other resources for you. Okay, now we are at the actual interview. We're at interview day. Make sure you are arriving early. That can be a little bit tricky virtually because you don't really want to be sitting on camera awkwardly with some people for a really long time, but you want to make sure that you're there and prepared, your technology is working. Be yourself, okay? They want to meet you. That is their goal. You are qualified. They want to meet you. Have a conversation. Doesn't have to be strictly, they're going to ask me a question, I'm going to answer. They're going to ask me a question. This can be a conversation of back and forth. Show your enthusiasm and your confidence. This can be tricky for some people, depending on your personality, depending on whether or not you are more extroverted or more introverted, but especially over Zoom, please practice your smile, practice your enthusiasm, be confident. If you tend to be more introverted, prepare ahead of time. Think of some ways that you can really take a break. You can go for a walk. You can come back and be ready for your next interview because this can be a long day. Smile, please smile, practice your smile. One of the things that I say in mock interviews all the time is smile, okay? And do that from the beginning as you're introducing yourself. This is one easier way, I would say, to have a really great first impression and why it's so important to practice that tell me about yourself, because we can be so nervous, right? I get really nervous too before interviews. And so if you have that tell me about yourself, you kind of know what you want to say. Smile. Hopefully by the end of that answer, you're feeling a little bit calmer, a little more ready to continue with the interview. Remember, everything is part of the interview. This is, I would say, less likely over virtual, but still everything is part of the interview. So if there's an optional session with students, there's an optional lunch, optional dinner, all of that is part of the interview. They're going to ask those students, what did you think about this person? The story that I give is I was asked to pick up an interviewee at the airport when I was in grad school. The first thing she did when she got in my car was say that she had no desire and no plan to go to this school. She was only there for a vacation. Do you think she got into that school? She did not, okay? So just be prepared. Everything that you are saying, everything that you are doing is part of that interview. It might go in your report. It might end up in that file, okay? But use that to your advantage too, right? Tell students you really want to go there. Be enthusiastic with the students. Say, I'm really looking forward to going to vet school, med school, dental school here. Okay, please, interview day, turn off your cell phone. That goes for virtual interviews as well. Tell your family, look, I'm going to be in an interview all day. Please don't contact me. Put your phone away. My phone is going to be off. Don't expect a response. And try not to look at it, right? It's easy to tell, right? Oh, I'm going to look down on my phone. I'm just going to check that notification. Please don't do that during your interview. Don't put your headphones in. Let's say this goes more for in-person interviews. But if you're in person, you're with other students, be interacting with them, be talking to them. Don't have your headphones in on your phone looking down, okay? Be present, get to know the other people that you're interviewing with. This is also really important. You're not expected to have all of their answers, okay? I've heard from some students that they get asked a question that seems so odd in some ways, like, oh, what do you think the best technological advance in medicine is going to be 10 years from now? No, I have no idea. It's okay to say, I don't know, but it would be great if we had this. Or I've noticed this gap, and it would be really cool if somebody came up with a way to close that disparity or make it a little bit easier for physicians to do X or Y or Z. Again, they care less about what your answer is, more about your critical thinking, more about your thought process. It is okay to think out loud for those types of questions. Have fun, okay? I know I have that really big on this slide. Again, this can be challenging because we're nervous. We care about it a lot. That's a good thing. That's important. If you weren't nervous about it, I would be more worried about you. I would think, do you care, right? Because you're stressed before you're nervous, that shows that you care a lot and it's really important to you. But try to have fun, get to know the other students, get to know the students who are there, get to know the other interviewees, try to make some connections with medical school faculty. If you're in an MD PhD program, try to make some connections with the research faculty. Okay. If there is a blemish or an incident on your record, be prepared to address that. I've heard from some students that especially if it's an open file interview or even a closed one, but sometimes what happens is they'll review your application and come up with a couple of questions that they want you to answer interview day. Be prepared to answer those. Again, don't blame, give data, talk about what you learned, how you grew from that, and assure them that this will not be a concern when you are in medical school, when you are a physician or a vet or a dentist later, okay? Okay, after the interviews, reread all of your notes, okay? Keep track of everything that you learned. Again, this can be a little bit challenging if you have multiple interviews back to back. So review your notes. Send thank you notes. This is really important. We recommend that you send them within 24 to 48 hours of your interview. Find out from the person who schedules your interview how to send these. Some schools like them to come through their portal. Some you can find email addresses, but send thank you notes to everyone that you interacted with during that interview. This is the person who does the scheduling. This is students, other administrators that you interact with, any individual faculty members. Send thank you notes to all of these people. Okay, next, follow their instructions. I'm going to say it again. Follow their instructions. If they tell you to do X or Y or Z, please do that. So, for example, if they say, don't send thank you notes to individual faculty members, please instead submit them this way, do that, okay? This goes for updates too. Follow their instructions about updates. Some schools love updates. They say, yeah, send us an update once a month. Remind us that you're interested in the school. Some say 3. You can send a total of 3 updates after your interview. And so you need to think about, when is the best time for me to send an update? Is this thing that happened important enough to send an update? If you have a paper published, absolutely send an update. If you have started a new clinical experience, get some hours in, get some experience. I would say that is also something that would warrant an update, but please follow their instructions for how to submit and how often you should be sending those updates. Okay, now I'm gonna sort of turn a little bit, okay, and talk a little bit about MMIs. So this picture here shows in person a little bit what this looks like. Virtually, schools are still doing it this way. They do it very similarly, where they sort of send you from virtual room to virtual room. Okay, there are lots of different things you may encounter at MMI stations. It could be a scenario. They tell you something that happens, ask you some questions at the end. It could be a task. You need to give directions how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, okay? It could be a role play. In some cases, there are students or they actually hire actors to role play with you. And so if that is the case, you might walk into a room, this could be in person or virtually. They would start talking to you, you would ask them some questions. They'll tell you what role you are going to play. You are playing the role of physician. You are playing the role of nurse. Or in those rooms, it could be a traditional Q&A. Most of the time, you have a couple of minutes, let's say 2, outside the room. And again, this is virtual or in person. Outside the room, read the question, read the scenario, and sort of prepare. Again, if it is virtual, make sure you are following directions. Some schools in their directions say you are not allowed to take notes. So don't do anything during that 2 minutes that makes it look like you are taking notes, okay? Follow their directions. My recommendation is that you read it, you sort of think, you sort of make a bulleted list of the main things you want to make sure to talk about. You're going to go into the room. Many cases, you're going to introduce yourself, they're going to introduce themselves, and then you're going to go ahead and start talking. Okay. There are lots of different scoring categories that they might be using. They could be scoring you on your ethics, values, professionalism, communication skills, teamwork, compassion and empathy, cultural competence, or your problem-solving skills. So my recommendation, if you know you have an MMI, is to start looking through some questions. Again, there's no possible way that you can prepare every single question because there are so many that you can find, but this is something that you can get better at when you start practicing. Okay, our recommendation, let's say you have a scenario. Let's say it's something like you are driving down the street and you see someone who's injured on the side of the road. What are you going to do? Okay, most of the time they give you more details than that, but let's go with this scenario. The structure we recommend is first to recapitulate what happened. So again, you can imagine you're reading the scenario and then you're going to walk into the room, virtually or in person. You might say, if I'm understanding correctly, the situation that I just read was, I was driving down the street, there was someone who was injured on the side of the road. The next thing is to give some perspectives and maybe some questions. Try not to go too far from that scenario, but it's important to think about different perspectives. Well, from my perspective, here's what's happening. Here's what I'm thinking. From this person's perspective, maybe there's another person or group of people in that scenario. You're going to want to address all of their different perspectives. Then address or answer the question. Sometimes there's going to be a scenario, they're going to ask you a question, answer the question, okay? You don't have to, say yes or no. You don't have to be so direct, I would say. They, again, want to hear your thought process, but make sure you're answering the question. So before you go into the room, read that question one more time so that you're answering it, and then briefly summarize again. So overall, or in summary, there was a woman on the side of the road. Here's what I would do. Here's the answer to the question. Okay. This is something it's important to practice. Do it in front of a mirror, do it with other people. If you Google MMI scenarios, you'll get many. This is the book that we recommend. It's called Multiple Many Interviews. And so it has lots of scenarios, lots of sample answers. It goes through, again, this strategy that we recommend, this step-by-step way of answering those MMI questions. Okay, here are some additional resources for you. We have a blog post about preparing for the MMIs. We have an interviewing blitz slides from the Career Symposium. Hopefully, if you are at the NIH, you got the email from Dr. Hernandez-Ramon about what you need to do before the mock interviews. And hopefully you will plan on participating in those group mock interviews. Okay, so some final notes. Make a positive first impression, smile, be enthusiastic, show them that you are prepared, you are ready, you know what you are getting yourself into. Show that you understand the profession and really well. So I think this is where you want to be really clear if you're applying to med school, or you have an interview at a DO school or a vet school, PA school. Why did you choose that particular program, that particular profession? Make sure you're demonstrating your knowledge about their program. So show you are a good fit and that you'll contribute to their environment. They're looking for students who are going to work well with others, who are going to have all of those AAMC competencies. And so show all of those things. Express your excitement of this opportunity. You want to enroll there. So tell them, I'm really excited to be here today. At the end of your interview, thank you so much. It was great to meet you. I've learned so much about this program. I really hope to enroll in this program. Okay, say those things. Thank you very much for being here. Show that you've prepared yourself for that career and that you have the required skill set. So again, look over your list of your activities. Think about what you wrote in your primary, what you wrote in your secondaries, what skills you have, maybe what gaps you have, but what progress you have made. Again, that will help you in medical school, will help you as a future physician. What is your understanding of improving health for others, improving health for everyone? Add something not covered previously. Maybe there's something that wasn't in your primary, wasn't in your secondary for whatever reason. There's going to be a little bit of a gap, right, between when you submitted and when you actually interview. So they might ask you, is there something else that you want to include? Think about having something ready to go. Or maybe it's something as simple as, well, when I submitted my primary, I only had some shadowing hours, or I only had some clinical hours, but over the summer, I've continued to do that. Here are the things that I've learned. You know, now I'm able to do some in-person shadowing, or now I'm able to have an in-person clinical experience. And so that would be something I would make sure to highlight in your interview. All right. With that, I feel like I gave you a lot of information in 50 minutes. And so thank you all so much for your time. Again, follow Dr. Hernandez-Ramon's instructions. If you are at the NIH, you are a postbac, please read her email. You need to have attended this session, one of our wellness opportunities. So this could be meditation, this could be a drop-in group, this could be something else on our wellness site. And then starting Friday at noon, you can sign up for a group mock interview. So thank you for your time. And I will go ahead and open up the Q&A. And as you're typing in questions, I think Jackie put here, you can upvote them too. So if you see a question, you want to make sure I answer it, you can upvote it and it will go to the top of my list. Will we always find out who our interviewer is beforehand? No, however, it's something that I would ask, okay? Can you tell me the schedule? Can you tell me who my interviewer is going to be? Sometimes you get that information, but you get it really late, like the day before. And so make sure the day before your interviews that you're not spending a 12-hour day in the lab, okay? Make sure that you are spending some time reviewing your application, reviewing your schedule. You know exactly where to be and when, and that you are certain of the time zone, okay? Especially virtually, if you're interviewing in California, make sure you are on time. Can one of your questions at the end of an interview be, is there anything in my application that makes you hesitant about my candidacy? Maybe. In some cases, they don't have your application handy, or they're looking for particular things, or they maybe don't remember your application as well. And so it could be, but I think it would be a stronger question to ask for some specifics about their program, about their academics, their clinical offerings. So maybe, but I think you could have a stronger question. If they're hesitant about something, in some cases, if they're really worried about it, they're going to ask you about it. I've heard some students get asked, why didn't you retake the MCAT? why did you retake the MCAT, right? And sometimes we get really defensive. Answer their question, okay? They're asking it for a reason. Just tell them the truth, right? Be yourself. Sometimes when we're in stressful situations, or I've had some students who, the first question that they get asked, and maybe it's just the tone of the interviewer, that, why did you do X, right? And it's asked in sort of a negative way. Just answer their question, right? It doesn't mean that they're hesitant about it. They just want to know why you did X or Y or Z or didn't do X or Y or Z. And it doesn't necessarily mean a red flag or that they're hesitant about your candidacy or your qualifications.
Hey, Kristen.
Yeah.
There's a few questions on here that I'm seeing related to using the computer microphone for interviews, or using a headset or earphones. Is one distracting? You might want to mention that. We talked about earphones in a face-to-face, but I was thinking about for this. Yeah.
So I think either one is fine, is the short answer. Make sure you practice it ahead of time. I don't think it's distracting to the interviewer. Like when I have students that have a headset, it's just only distracting to me if it's not working well or the student is playing with it. If you know you have a tendency to move things and you have a headset and you have your microphone right here and you're going to be moving that cord, and so you're going to end up with some static, you're going to end up with them being able to hear you some of the time, not some of the time. I would say that's my biggest distraction. I think if you use it well, if it doesn't bother you, it's fine. Sometimes the sound is better that way, but again, make sure you absolutely practiced it ahead of time and that you are not going to fidget with those things.
Mm-hmm. And there was a few questions about, you had mentioned early in the workshop about a list of schools that are talking about their interviews, and where is that? And then is there a list for dental schools? I have to look for that one.
So I don't know the answer to the list of dental schools. Mm-hmm. I put the link in the presentation and I'll send you these slides later so you can click on it. But the way that I found it was literally typing interviews, AAMC Medical School 2022. And it was the first link, it popped up. And then you'll see when you download it, it just looks like, an Excel document, and it has the name of the school, some other things on that list, and it tells you, and in some cases it gives you some really fantastic information, some really specific information about how many interviews there'll be, how long, with whom. And so I would definitely recommend that you look at that document for all of your schools. And I'll look up the dental school one, but try it for dental school.
Yeah. And then one other common question that a lot of people have had during your presentation is, so a lot of the questions that you've been talking about, they saw on secondaries or even during the Casper. When you get to the interview, if you're asked that again, should you answer it the same way? How should you approach that? Mm-hmm.
So again, I think it's fine to use the same story. It's fine to use a new story. And depending on the interviewer, depending on the format, they may or may not have seen your secondary, but they want that person to show up. And so I think if there's some overlap, that's completely fine. This is one reason that I say definitely read your primary, read your secondaries, know what is on there. And so I think either way is fine. It's going to be really different reading it versus you showing your excitement, your enthusiasm, the things that you have learned from that experience or about your background or about yourself. So I think either one of those is fine.
Okay. And just one other thing about backgrounds is people are asking about what kind of virtual background should they have? Do we recommend?
Oh, it's another good question. This is something that you can ask if you have a group interview. It's something I always comment about when I do group interviews. And so I think this could be anything that is not distracting, okay? And anything that doesn't have any red flags, okay? So behind me, what do you see? Not very much. If this was your space and this was where you were interviewing, and when I'm here with my children, I lock my door to make sure that I'm not interrupted so nobody opens this door while I'm in an interview. You can move your desk, if it's possible, up against just a blank wall. That's a really good place. If you're at the NIH trying to limit what's behind you, you just don't want to be distracting. And again, red flags, like you definitely don't want like a bottle of alcohol, right, in your screen. You don't want something that's going to be like, where are they? What are they doing? So I think the plainer, the better. If you can be up against a wall, that's great. I also mentioned about the lighting. Test your lighting, especially at that time in the day. So even in my office, the lighting is better in the afternoon than in the morning. Actually, at this time of day in the afternoon, because I get sun coming in here, the lighting is actually better if I have this overhead light off. So test all of those things at the time of day. And again, that location. I don't recommend a virtual background. I think it gets a little bit awkward sometimes, right? Where you're coming in and out of that green screen. Or if you just blur your backgrounds, it can be distracting. I know for me, sometimes if I'm meeting with a student and they have a blurred background, I'm trying to figure out where they are and what's behind them. And so I don't recommend a virtual or a blurred background. I much prefer something very plain, something very conservative. I get questions like, is this piece of artwork okay? Most of the time, yes, again, so long as it's not distracting. Is there anything you want to add to that, John?
No, I think that sounds good. The one thing that I noticed from last year is that some schools might send you a background they want you to use, and it might be a virtual one. Like one of the schools had like a background with their medical school, and they said, please use this for your interview. So if that's the case, follow what they would prefer to have.
Follow the directions. And I think
I did see a couple of those.
And that brings me to another good point that's about naming. I'm a very visual learner. I'm going to remember a student's face and what they have named. So if you go by a nickname, I would include both. Like, let's say I went by my middle name, Marie. I would include Kristen, Marie, Zukowski somehow. So that you can say, and even in your intro, you can say, my name is Kristen Morgan, I actually go by Marie. I would put both of those things so they can make sure when they're remembering you later that they can match your name, your face, who you were. And so I'd be really upfront, especially for those of you who go by something different than what is your legal name on your application. Make them aware of that. For women with long hair, would you recommend wearing it up or down? Which is more professional? I think either way is fine. But again, think about your fidgets, think about your nervous habits. If your hair is down and you're constantly going to be twirling it, I would put it up. If it's not going to bother you either way, I would say either one is completely fine. I wouldn't say one is more professional than the other, but just be aware of everything that you're doing on the virtual screen. I have a few years before I start applying for graduate programs for in-person interviews. Is it appropriate to bring a notepad with questions to ask? So, and John, you can chime in here too. My preference is that yes, you can bring something, but you don't have it out during your interviews. Okay, so review it beforehand. Maybe you're going to then be in that interview, but you don't want to be taking notes. And so I don't want you to really be looking down. I want you to be engaging and in conversation. Then my recommendation always, and this is what I did when I was applying to graduate school, you leave that interview, you walk down the hall, and then you furiously write down everything that you remember that they told you. Okay. The things that you want to make sure to remember that you're going to include in your thank you notes, that you want to remember just about their program as you're making decisions where you actually want to matriculate. So I say, yes, you can bring them, but don't necessarily have them out. Definitely don't have your cell phone out at any time. I get questions about bringing like water bottles. I think that's completely fine too. Again, so long as you're not playing with it. I prefer you to go ahead and take a sip of water before you go in. Some of them are really short, 30 minutes, and leave. But if you really do need it and you want it with you, then I think it's absolutely, and virtually it's a lot easier. Again, just don't be playing with it. Don't be constantly chugging on your bottle of water. Is the Casper test quite similar to the MMI? If we felt confident during Casper, can we use those same skills to prep for the MMI? Similar, yes and no. I don't know, I can't really answer this question about your confidence and your preparation for the Casper. But if you prepared in sort of the way that I outlined, how we recommend summarizing perspectives, questions, answering the question, summarizing, then I think yes, in some ways this could be similar. If you didn't feel as confident in the Casper, or you got a score back from your Casper that maybe you're not quite as happy with as you had hoped, start preparing, start planning. Definitely go to a mock interview, definitely go to a group mock interview. At the group mocks, we do try to get to at least one scenario MMI question. And so get some feedback as you're thinking about those MMIs.
There's a question here about, aside from the MMI, are group interviews common during med school interviews? Our interviews like with the group, and we're thinking virtually too.
So I would say not common, but yes, they happen. And as I was looking through that list that I talked about, there are still schools that are definitely doing group interviews. And that's one reason that we like the group mock interviews too. I think it's a great way to get some ideas from other people, to be able to share feedback, but also to be in a group situation. My advice when you are in a group situation and there are multiple students in that interview is that you are not spending all of your time prepping your answer, okay? Be listening to the other students. They do these groups for a reason. And so how great would it be if you could refer back? Well, let's say they ask you something about a strength, and you can then say, oh, well, I have the same strength as John. He talked about X. It's helped me in this slightly different way. And so be engaging with those other students. Sometimes you could have a panel interview where it's you, but it's 3 interviewers. Make sure you're making eye contact with all 3 of them, talking to all 3 of them. If they are rotating, asking you the questions, don't only look at the person who asked you the question, but look at each one of them, make eye contact with all of them. After an interview, how does a medical school make a decision about you? Do they look at your primary and secondary, or do they just rely on how you did in the interview to decide at that point? They're going to look at your whole application. They're going to look at everything in most cases, but the interview definitely makes a big impact. And so it really just depends on the school. John, is there anything else you want to add to that one?
No, what was the question?
How do they make the decision? Do they review your entire application and your interview, or is the interview at that point how they make a decision?
A decision about, I'm sorry, I missed it. I was typing.
About getting into medical school.
So remember, they're looking at your application from a holistic perspective. So it will be, an interview will be part of everything else in your application. The interview results go back to a committee and then they make decisions. So it won't be just an interview that will get you in, but a very significant, important part of it.
If in person, what is appropriate to bring outside of proper attire? I think this depends. I think it's a great question. And it depends on sort of the format. I think bringing a bag, again, something that's conservative, something that's professional, something briefcase-like is okay. If you're going to bring your phone at all, make sure it's inside your bag, off, not on silent, not on vibrate, off. It could be appropriate to bring something to write with, as well as a bottle of water, maybe a snack, maybe some nuts, whatever else you need that day. But I wouldn't bring a lot if possible. And again, make sure your phone is off, off, off.
Let's see here.
What are some fresh?
I think there was a couple of questions. There was a question here about, is there kind of our opinion, is there anything can you give some examples of common encounters that she's saying that you don't like to see in the interviewers, or something that happens in interviews that we might want to prepare the students for, is how I'm interpreting that. Like for me, what I would say is we like to see that we're hoping that you have a positive interviewing experience when you go on interviews. However, you might note that some of the interviewers may not feel as warm and inviting as what you would like to be. Like Kristen is very warm and inviting presenter, and I tend to think that I like to be very engaging in interviews. However, some schools and some people, in order to be consistent with everybody that they interview, they might give what I call kind of a flat interview. Like they might ask a question, but they don't give you a lot of smiles or wonderful kind of things. And you walk away feeling as though, oh, I made a mistake. It's really just the style that person's using in their interview. So that's the one thing, is if sometimes the questions might feel a little direct or gruff, like, tell me about a time when you made a mistake on something, or you really screwed up, and it comes across as kind of rude. Go ahead and answer the question. The idea is just to kind of go ahead and answer the question and kind of remain calm and professional on your end. That would be my comment about that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that, John, that like John said, in order to make things, people are moving to more structured interviews. We know that structured interviews, people are much more likely to be judged equitably. And so some schools, it does feel less like a back and forth conversation because they don't ask a lot of follow-up questions. They're really reading off of their sheet, asking the questions that they have to ask everybody in exactly the same way. So sometimes that can, again, feel a little bit jarring for students. Medical schools have been doing this for a long time. They pick their interviewers for a reason. And we've heard this from some schools. And so sometimes they do just want to see what happens under pressure. Like, I'm not saying that like to scare you necessarily, but yeah, if it comes across as not quite like what you were expecting, or I sometimes try to do this in my group mock interviews, and I feel like I don't have a very good angry face, but just stay calm. Remind yourself that you are qualified. They are interviewing you for a reason, and your ultimate goal is to go to medical school. The other thing that I didn't mention about you having control over your virtual environment is if there's something that you want to remember, there's something that you want to say, you have a mantra that you've been using, put that on your wall, put that behind your computer, so that you can look up and remain positive, remain calm. For the MMIs, those are individual graders. Those are individual rooms. And so I've met with some students who say, man, the first room, and it's random, right? So you can imagine that students are just going from room to room. And that first room was rough. And so it's figuring out how to calm your brain, how to calm your body, calm your mind, and start that next room with a blank slate. What happened in that other room? We need to try, and this is with earlier interviews in the day too, and this can be challenging. Try not to overthink that when you go to a new room or to a new interview. It's a new opportunity to make a fantastic new first impression. Again, remind yourself you're qualified. You have many more chances to make an impression. And so try not to be thinking in room number 3, oh, in room 1, I should have said X or Y or Z. There are some questions about makeup. I think whatever you feel comfortable with is fine. I don't think you have to wear makeup to be seen as professional. But like I said, I wouldn't go over the top with makeup. I would tone it down a little bit, but I don't think you have to wear makeup.
There's some additional ones related to piercings, tattoos, earrings for across genders, for men, women, across genders. Any thoughts on that?
So I think Again, it's a bit of a conservative profession. So let's say you like have a nose piercing. I would either take it out or I would put in a small stud. I wouldn't do over the top jewelry. I would, you're going to be in professional attire. So as far as, tattoos, I would mostly try to cover them up if that's possible. If it's something that you can't, then you can't. There's nothing that you can do about that. But I would think about, in particular, medical school being a very conservative, very professional profession. How far back should we go? So if you have something that's really extremely relevant, important to your career in high school, I would say it's okay. So the one here is I have shadowing experience from high school. I think that's an okay place to start, but don't end there, right? They really want to know what you have done since matriculating in college. You're a really different person now than you were 4 or 5 years ago. And so I want to hear much more about what you have done to confirm that while in college, the different types of shadowing and clinical experiences that you've had in a variety of fields, again, to confirm you know what this profession is about, you've seen it, you've been in that environment, and you are prepared, you are ready for that profession. That is what you're convincing them.
There's a question here, a couple of them related to, kind of related to what you're talking about. One has to do with if one of the questions is they have an international student who later immigrated. Can I talk about my background? Would that benefit me or not during the interview? What are you thinking?
Sorry, say that one more time.
This one question, I think it's a good one. As an international student who later immigrated, can I talk about my background? Would that benefit me or not?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. We want to know about you. We want to know about your background. We want to know about your resilience. We want to know about transitioning. Transitions are hard. And if you have immigrated and you have been successful here, absolutely, that will help you. That will convince them again as you're transitioning to medical school, which can be a difficult transition, that you are well prepared and you are ready. So yes, absolutely.
And then one last one I'll pop in here is another one. Should we add our choice of pronouns during the interview, or how would they include that? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think you could do it in the tell me about yourself. I also saw one about pronouncing names. I think absolutely in your tell me about yourself, that's a time to be really slow and clear in your pronunciations in your pronouns. You can also rename yourself, and I know more and more schools are doing this. We often do this at OIT. You can include your pronouns when you rename yourself.
On your screen.
Yeah, on your screen. And I sometimes from students, this is a challenging situation. You want to be enthusiastic. You want to get there. You want to convince them that you want to go. Can you correct them? And so I think there's a kind way to say, actually, it's Zukowski, right? People mispronounce my name all the time. And sometimes it's fine. Sometimes I let it go. Sometimes it bothers me. And so I think in this situation, it's fine to say, actually, my pronouns are she, her, hers. And so I think if you do it in a kind way, then it's fine to do that here. And that goes for pronunciation too. The other thing that I recommend is if you have names, in particular names that aren't necessarily American, and then make sure to pause between your first name and your last name, and not just string it all together so that your interviewer isn't necessarily sure what is your first name, what is your last name. I hope that makes sense, but just give it a little bit of a pause. The slides I will send to you. I'm sorry, I have my slides up, and so I didn't put them in the chat, but I'll send them to you later today. Close files, is it okay to repeat anecdotes? Yes, I answered that one. You are not going to receive a confirmation after attending a wellness event. We're just going to ask you when you get to the group mock interview, okay?
There's a
What
couple
kind of, go ahead.
There's a couple questions here related to like when they're extended the invitation for interview and how to respond to that invitation. And do they say thank you, how to respond, and how to schedule it? And what if you have overlapping schedules? That's another one.
Yeah, it's challenging. So I think early you want to show that you are excited. And so, I mean, I don't think be so stressed about doing like immediately. Like, I don't think you need to like refresh your email a million times that day. But promptly schedule. I think if you have overlapping interviews, most of the time when you get your invitations for interviews, you're going to be given multiple options. If none of those options work for you, that's a lovely problem to have, right? Medical schools are going to work with you. So say, I'm really excited to have received this invitation. I really do want to come to this interview. I really want to come to your school. Can you work with me? Is there a different window that we can use? I think that's completely fine. We are recording. You will be able to re-watch this presentation after this session. You're going to have to re-register. If you've already registered, my understanding is that if you click on this link again, it won't work. But if you click on the registration link, you go back in, you re-register, you'll be able to watch the recording. And it should be available later today. There's a question about mental health. I think that's a great question, something that we talk about a lot. I think this is the time that I would meet with a pre-med advisor, talk through the risks and the benefits and why you want to include that in your interview and what it shows about you. I think it's something that there is still a lot of stigma around mental health, so there is risk to disclosing some of those things. If it is stated in a way that is, or you need to talk about it because you had a really terrible semester in college and so you want to sort of fill in that gap, my recommendation is that you talk about what you did, that it is no longer affecting you and it will not affect you once you get to medical school. But if you have a question about it, that is one that I would have a one-on-one conversation with one of us at OITE if you are at the NIH, or a pre-med advisor back at your school so that you can again think through why you plan or want to disclose that information. As far as sending an email and not receiving a response, this really is dependent. I think people have different preferences. I think if you wait a week and you ping them again, that's completely fine. I wouldn't do it a whole lot more than that. Sometimes I miss emails and I'm completely fine if students are like, hey, did you forget about me? Can you answer my question? But don't do it a lot of times, or a nice follow-up email that sometimes is great from students is, I'm just following up to see if you can answer my question. If you can't, is there someone else that I could ask? And so sometimes that's a nice way to get connected with someone else. I mentioned some red flags when it comes to the weakness question. Again, this is one that maybe I would recommend that you discuss with a pre-med advisor. The one example that I always give that for me was like oh, don't say that in your real interview, was a student that asked what a weakness was. And she said that she took a class in the medical school last year and she failed it. And I was like, oh, don't say you failed a medical school class. But there are other examples, right? Anything that's gonna say to that committee, oh, maybe this person isn't gonna be successful in medical school, I would stay away from. I get asked the question a lot, is it okay if I have a weakness that is really super common? I think common weaknesses are fine, but give a very specific situation, a very specific example. Make sure you are telling concrete strategies for overcoming that weakness. If you don't have a pre-med advisor at your school and you do not work at the NIH, I don't know if John, you can come up with the link quickly. There is a link again on the AAMC site. There's an association of pre-med advisors and those people are available for you. So that's what I would recommend.
Yeah, coming up quickly will be I'm sorry, coming up with it quickly will be a bit of a challenge, but there is a site from the NAAHP, National Association. Yeah, National Association of Advisors in Health Professions. And if you go there, there should be a way you can pose a question or get, may I find an advisor? And there are volunteer advisors that will help you. Okay, you might also check in your career center at your university. Some schools don't have pre-med advisors, but the career center might do interviews and advising related to that, or even have referrals for you. Okay.
So it's getting close to 2 o'clock and I have to go to another talk at 2 o'clock, but I'm going to answer right now 3 more questions. And then if you have any additional ones, you can feel free to email me or another pre-med advisor. One is, when should we start expecting interview invites? That is one thing that is on that document. It could be any time from now for a really long time. And so it really is just dependent on the school. If an interviewer asks an inappropriate question, how do we address it, deflect? I think you can be kind, respectful, honest, move on, try not to overthink it. And then depending on the question, I would reach out to one of your pre-med advisors, reach out to us. There are some situations that it is worthwhile following up, telling the committee something additional. And so think through that a little bit with a pre-med advisor. And then I'll answer the, I've heard that LGBTQ students that are out in the application are often asked about coming out. For something so personal, how do you recommend answering questions like this? I think this is another excellent question. And I'll talk about this in 2 ways. Anything that you have mentioned in your primary or your secondary application, I would say is fair game in the interview. And so this doesn't just go for if you are LGBTQIA+. This could be, you know, if you talk about something else that is really personal to you, to your family, be prepared to answer that in some way. Whether or not, you know, that's the best question, I'm not going to state that, but if you mentioned it in your application, it's fair game. As far as this question for something so personal, you can answer this in any way that is true to you. And so if this is something that you are worried about and you came out in your application, practice this question with someone. Think about, again, well, first of all, why it's important, maybe more or less important, but be prepared to answer this question. And I don't think you have to go into a lot of detail, but be prepared to comment on anything that is in your primary or your secondary. And we're all happy to walk you through those things. Practice them. Don't cry in your interview. Don't cry about a death of a family member in your interview. And be you, right? They want to meet you. And so I get the question about LGBTQ, about you know, persons of color going to more or less diverse institutions. And, you know, should I talk about Black Lives Matter? Should I talk about the protests that I've been a part of? And I think this is something to really consider what that school is. Do you want to be there? Do you feel comfortable being there? Do you want to spend the next 4 years of your life at that school? And so again, what are the risks and benefits? And how can you be true to you and true to yourself and it be a good fit for you for the next 4+ years? So I'll add that as well. All right, I feel like we did a lot of questions, went through a lot of things. You're all amazing. And I just want to remind you to try to enjoy this process a little bit. Remind yourself of all of the amazing hard work that you have done and the reasons why you are going through this process. And the end goal is to be a doctor, a vet, a dentist, a PA, whatever that is. And so find some mentors, find some people who are going to help you, push you, encourage you on this really long path that doesn't end with interviews, it doesn't end with your acceptance, but doesn't end until you're really doing what you love and what you want to be doing for the rest of your life. So you're doing great. Prepare. Start now. Reach out if you have questions. Reach out if you need support, encouragement. That's our job. That's why I love my job. That's why John and Elena love their jobs too. So thank you for being here, and have a really good afternoon. Bye.